Now that your pattern and your fabric are all marked and ready, go ahead and print out, if you haven't already, the document called White Top and White Bottom. The two documents combined become one, just as your pattern is in 4 pieces for the ultimate pattern. And you can see that this is printed in blue. You don't have to. You can put your printer on grayscale and have it print in gray. We just want to have a guide for the white ink because white is harder to see through the fabric. And I did have a lot of white beneath some of the subtler colors that you'll see on the pattern. So go ahead and print these out, and you'll see a little arrow there. You want to make sure that you don't cut over that arrow. We're going to go ahead and cut this down a little bit. Once you've cut that, then I'd place a line of glue along the edge, and take your bottom piece and lay it over the top of the other. And you can go ahead and tape this if you like. Now that I have the pattern glued together, I'm going to place it on the glass, and I'm going to tape it in place so that I can know that it's not going to slip beneath the fabric. Now I'm going to tape this down on 4 corners to the glass and position the fabric over the top. And you'll notice that this pattern has the same markings that your fabric does, so you can line up the X's on the top and the bottom. And then using the friction pin or another iron away type of pin, just go ahead and kind of draw an outline of the areas that you want to ink in white. Now you could speed this up by laminating the white pattern as well, just as you did the colored pattern, and then you can just ink right over all of those colors. And you'll notice I'm not being that careful about being exactly accurate. The only place I think it really matters is at the top of the waterfall. You want to make sure that that is going straight. And then all of the rest of this is going to kind of blend in. The tree area would be another area to be mindful of. We're just going to do a hint of white going up these trunks of trees. When I'm using this pen, I'm barely pushing down. Now we can remove the pattern. Set it aside should you want to do this again. Now we're going to secure this pattern and fabric together. Once you know that you have one area lined up, go ahead and pin, and you can do so by lifting up on the pattern. When you pin through, try not to cause the pattern to bow. You want to make sure it stays flat. You can put something down on top of it to help it stay flat for you, and then pin. Now, if you're relatively in position, if you're pretty much straight to some degree on both top and bottom and on the sides, if it's a little skewed because you didn't trace quite accurately, it's not going to matter. What matters is that it's not tipped dramatically going at an angle. It would matter more if we were putting something like this on a garment. I think it's adequate to pin it on 4 sides over the stars. Now you'll want to be mindful that you don't poke yourself with those pins to protect yourself from the possibility, because it can become very distracting when you're doing something so fun. You can put a little bit of tape right over the tip of the pin I'm pretty good at poking myself with pins. All right, I think I'm safe from the damage I could have done to myself. Now for this particular part, we're going to use the white without any water added to it. And I want you to use your flat brush. And this brush will help you to be able to do that straight edge. There's the flat brush. It's going to help you maintain a nice sharp edge along the top of the waterfall. The fact that the pattern is attached to the fabric means that not only can we tip our board, we can also spin the fabric without it becoming separated from the pattern. So taking some white, going across. So I'm patting the fabric. I'm just going all the way across. We want a good solid amount of, not heavy, but so that we know that that white is really going to show against the contrasting creamy, subtle color of the fabric. And I'm doing so with a downward stroke, keeping the brush flat. Another good idea is to work from furthest point away from you toward you so that you don't put your hand right over an area that's already wet. So I'm going to go up here now and just doing a little hint of white where the trees are. You don't even have to do a solid actual line of it, as this is the trees and they don't really have a bark that is as solid. It has chunks of bark. It's a very pretty tree. Placing the brush and lifting it and moving it up so that there's gaps between the white. Once again, just tapping and then going ahead and leaving that break and going up for smaller lines. Don't lay the brush sideways, put the brush upright. So here we have a smaller tree. So my hand isn't down so much, it's more upright, but still using the side of the brush. So you can see now it's kind of like paint by numbers. Now we've got a side-to-side flow. This is how the water, when the light reflects against it, it glistens, and it's it's not a solid white section. So like when the sun is setting on the ocean, you see highlighted marks where the sun glistens because the water is in movement. And as it dips down, you don't see that area that goes dark, and then another area pops up and it's light. So this is not something that needs to be quite solid. And just go ahead and brush now side to side. And it's okay if it breaks up and isn't a solid section. In other words, if some areas are thicker than others, that's okay. There's a tendency to want to move fast through something like this. Try to keep yourself reined in and not rush this process. Now I'm going to go ahead, and this is another straight line. So notice I rotate the brush. Another straight top of another area where the water kind of forms its own little waterfall and it drops down. And then it kind of flows sideways there. Again. Now I could continue to use the flat brush, however, the line brush will work easier for the remainder of this, so I'm going to clean this brush and let it sit to dry on its side. I'm using the largest of the two line brushes. I'm going to add more white to my pot here, but I'm not going to add a lot more because we don't want to have more in these little portable containers than we need, because it's more likely to dry out. Wet the brush and dry some of it off, so we don't want it dripping. We don't want any drips coming down, because then that could cause it to drip over. Remember, this is the white and we want a good solid coverage. See how nice that flowed out of there. In this case, I'm swinging my wrist from side to side, but my elbow is supported by the table. And we don't want to go at an angle and come down and fill it in side to side. This is what creates that illusion of the hemisphere, the straightness of the planet as we're walking toward the sunset. It doesn't tip like that unless there's a mountain coming down, and then there's always this straight edge. Imagine the ocean and how it just seems to just drop straight off. So we want to keep that going side to side, not come at a diagonal. At the end here, I'm just gonna do a little extra, little small ones. Look around, make sure that I covered all the areas where I put ink. And to speed up the drying process, you can use a blow dryer and dry all of these areas. Instead of using a blow dryer, I'm going to use my iron, and I'm going to shoot steam, and at the same time is going to erase the actual friction pin marks. It's like magic. And then we're just left with white. Isn't that amazing? Now, there were two different size Sharpies that I recommended you had in your possession for this class. One is the fine and the other is the extra fine. And the extra fine has this squared off top on it and bottom. and the fine is rounded. Now, I don't feel that this is a fine tip at all. I would say that this would be medium compared to their big, pens, but it's not my company. So when I recommended you use the fine Sharpie, it's the bigger one that I'm recommending. When I recommend the extra fine, it's the smaller of the two. You can start with using the extra fine, but if you were to take the extra fine and the ink were still wet, it will immediately just destroy the pen and it won't work anymore. So you really do want to make sure that your ink has dried before you get any marker on it. But I can see through, and I'm going to draw or trace the rocks. I'm barely touching using the marker so that I can go over it with a thicker line afterwards. This is just to help me to know where my rocks are. If spending the time and making a second pattern doesn't bother you, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have it to compare to as you're doing the sketching of the lines, just to kind of reassure yourself. And it wouldn't hurt to stand up and look down from above. Going up my trees here, coming across. Now I can feel that it's wet and got some on me. There we go. I have too much equipment on in my studio for me to use a blow dryer. I might cause a circuit breaker to go out, so that is why I've chosen to not do that. I highly recommend that you dry yours, and that way you don't have to worry about getting your fingers all inked up. It's a lot of fun. Just kind of brings me back to my childhood. So you can see it's just kind of a real messy, loose drawing that we're doing here. And this is what makes it all come alive. Now on this tree part, I'm kind of going and making a V, going up, V, up, V, up, V, getting smaller as we come up to the top and skipping all together, as this is going to be done also by the stitching that we do with the sewing machine. By inking first, we have a good pattern to follow when we go ahead and start working with the actual sewing machine. So it's up and over, up and over, up and over, drop off. Up, over, pinky down, go slow. You don't have to go as fast as I'm going. Light touch, make sure your ink's dry so you don't ruin your Sharpie. And this is where, even though we're all doing the same design, it will vary, and each of ours should look different because we each draw differently. And then the inking also cannot be identical no matter how hard you try. I would leave the heavier marker for after you've done your inking to accentuate or help to define any inking that you may have felt didn't go the way you wanted. Now we're ready to work on some splattering. The first color I'm going to apply is the aqua color. It kind of looks more blue to me than aqua, so I'm choosing that for the sky. I'm going to go ahead and add quite a bit of water to this so that I get a very light splattering, very subtle color using the fan brush. Now just a little bit on the edge of the brush and take it in and see if it's the color that I like. And we can add a little bit more water to that. And you can just splatter if you're feeling comfortable to do that. If you're not, you can go ahead and try tracing over the areas that you see where I have already got blue. But don't be so careful as to try to be exact over that area. You just want to have some blue up there. And get some more water on this. And here's another section of blue. And you can see I dripped over there, and I don't care because it doesn't really matter. These are the areas that will just kind of drop off and nobody will even know, especially if you do some other random splatters to kind of make it more subtle. Splattering down here. And then in the water, we're going to add more blue, aqua. And because my brush is so wet, it's spreading it out nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of brush side to side now to make it look like water. And there's a very, very light touch on the brush, just going side to side with a lot of water, You can see how that flows inside of the cap. It's drippy. And it's actually blending with the green that I had in there before, but that's okay. Because we don't see one color anywhere. Even if you're looking at a lawn, you're looking at a beautiful lawn, you'll see lots of different shades of green in the lawn. And when you look at water, sometimes you even see purple. It's not always blue. I hope that you're feeling more relaxed about the process. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to do some green and because green is another light color. And this is the lime green. And since it's going in these confined areas where there's little grass implications of lawn area, I'm going to go ahead and use a liner instead of the fan brush. But I have quite a lot of water on my brush so that it will bleed out. And if it doesn't bleed as much as I like, add more water and just drop it onto the fabric and it kind of spreads out. And now, because this is a grass design right here, I'm just going up a little bit to imply that the lawn is going upward. Another area of green. And wet it. And splatter a little. And some more. Elbows down, even though my hand isn't down, because I'm trying not to get ink all over my hands. Pretending that there's grass, making the implication of grass right here. Bit more water. And wet. And if you splatter on that side, you need to splatter on this side. Trying to keep the green splatters near the grass, not in the sky area. And comparing to the actual pattern, I can see that I have some green here and over there. Some actually coming into the water over here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and bring it down into the water as I did before. So if you're noticing a difference in the color of the ink to the Babbling Brook, in part it's because the light is coming in from behind. And also I haven't got any stitching on there, and we haven't combined and brought in all of the richer colors. The brown, the rusty brown will definitely make an impact on this. But you can see how it's starting to look without the actual light coming through from behind. The next light colors that we want to apply are going to be the trees, and I'm going to actually flip my whole pattern upside down. Part of what you're seeing in the design are not trees at all, just the implication of trees. So you can see I did some blue lines going straight up and some more blotches and different shades of brown and tan going up, which makes it kind of look like trees far in the distance that you cannot quite make out. This is what gives it so much depth. Now I've added brown to the cap, and I'm going to let it mix with the green that's in there because it remains in the same color family if they are combined together. So it's really not a problem to mix them like this. And add some more water. So this is very, very light. Very little ink is inside of this. I'm just going to come up from the ground and move upward. And I'm not going to do a lot of any one color because there's really not as many strokes coming up from that area as your mind may believe. So you see, it's kind of like a lot of that cream color and then a lot of the splatter marks is what makes it look like that. Now I'm going to take some of the nude color and blend it into that. And this time I'm taking a good amount to add to that so that that color kind of takes over what's already mixing in there. And we're going to do some of the blotches or splatter. Now, if you're not comfortable doing that, once again, take your line brush. You can even just take the nude by itself as it comes out of the container and just look through the fabric at those that you see on the actual pattern and just kind of place little dots over those sections, and it'll look like you were brave enough to splatter. So I'm coming from the ground and coming up, and the wetter the brush, it's also kind of cool to grab your dirty water and use it. So this is just straight nude right out of the container, and I'm putting some on the rocks. As the rocks are not a solid color, they have several different colors kind of running through them, and usually because the sun is coming from above, the light areas are on the top of the rocks. It'll probably be easier for you, as it will be for me, to flip that right side up now and look at the rocks from your perspective. And I'm going to use the nude color with some water, but not as diluted, and go ahead now and kind of do the tops of all the rocks. So I'm using the liner brush, the bigger of the two line brushes right now for this. Not really worried too much about how accurately I do this. Wet the brush to make it bleed out a little bit. You can also wet the fabric before applying, remember that. It's again on the top of all the rocks, some of the nude straight out of the thing without mixing any other colors.
There we go.
Okay, we're going to put some of it in the water. Because water does reflect that which is around it. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some brown now. While the rocks are still wet, start from the bottom and pull up. Periodically getting more water on the brush. So now I'm using the side of the brush and brushing upward. Not pushing really hard though, because we don't want to ruin the brush. This is in part why I chose the brushes I did, because they can handle a little bit more aggressive behavior than a traditional crafter's brush. A little bit more water in my paint or my ink. Coming up, trying not to hide the grass that I already did. Rocks are round. They also have shadows that fall. So if the shadow is falling on this side, that means all of the rocks will have the shadow on the same side. So on this side, the shadow falls behind. So you can see this rock right here is behind that rock, and this is the back side of the rock, and the sun is coming from over here. Go ahead and get it wet to blend and make it appear you've used different colors of brown. So by having the majority of the ink placed before you get it wet down low on the rock, it will make it so that you can then pull up, and as you go up it gets lighter and lighter in color. Once again. And over here the trees are shading this rock, so this rock's going to be darker than the other rocks. And I'm achieving that by applying more brown here. We can also add black to that, and we will as we have time, because the fabric is significantly wet at this point. So we can blend and create the illusion of lots of layers of land here, pulling up from the bottom, building up, getting it wet again, letting it bleed out. Now back over here, this area's got lots of darkness as well. If you have dark next to light, the light shows up more. Inside of Create with Claire Rowley, the network area where the course is, as I mentioned before, where you'll find the documents, and inside of there is a smaller version of the pattern for you to print out so that you can use it to refer to as you're inking in case you lose your lines or your light is just not good enough in your room for you to see everything. From the background I pull up to imply more trees are there, so get the fabric wet and then pull up and pull up. Don't do a lot of this though. There's only a few areas of that brown coming up. And then by mixing the brown with the green that is inside of your container, you can create a different shade of green. And that's what you're seeing on the actual pattern when you see these different shades of green mixed in to different areas. It's mixing the green with the brown, and actually also mixing some black in sometimes will give you even more different looking colors of the same color family. I'm going to go ahead now and take more of the nude and go up the tree. So it's kind of going straight line up the tree. This is the color that I would want to see the most in the background here. Just not solid. Kind of like when you paint a wall in your house, you paint your wall solid. If you didn't, you wouldn't like it. In this case, we don't want a solid wall. We want a blotchy wall with lots of different shades and some areas where there's none at all, so that we get that sense of depth. Now there I have a line or two lines that I've created by being not careful enough, but I can take my water and bleed that out and make it not look like an accident. And by adding more of like looking things, then no one will know that it's a mistake. And also when we get into the stitching, and your stitches are going all around in there, it'll take the eye and on a trip through all of the different textures and and it'll be really hard for people to see your little errors. This, however, is too dramatic of a straight line, so I'm going to go in and make it not show up as much by bringing in a little bit thicker, and see how I can cover that up. And we'll go ahead and define another area that is no longer straight, and see how I camouflage my mistake. So the only way you have a real mistake is if somebody knows what you intended before you began. I suggest every once in a while picking it up and looking at it directly without the light looking through it, and you'll get a better idea of how everything's coming out. I'm really starting to like what I'm seeing, but I think I need to add more the brown color coming up as implied trees. This is where we try to be straight in our movement. But if you're not perfectly straight, it's okay. Trees are not perfectly straight either. All right. And over here, this was more of like a reddish rock, but I think by mixing the nude in with the brown, we can get a neutral color rock over here. One that looks different. Because not all rocks are the same color. It's going to be sad when the inking is over. What a mess. What do I do? You blend it and nobody knows. Okay, so to get some of my mistakes to not look so dramatic, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to integrate black into this. This is going to probably be the most intimidating of the colors for you, so you'll want to take it slow and just do a little bit. And I'm going to accentuate the ink that I placed there with the marker now. It's beginning to look really nice, isn't it? I am having so much fun. I hope that you're enjoying this as much as I am. I'm going to continue with the black, creating shadows or emphasizing what I've already done with the ink. And when I want to create that grayish look, just blend more water into the black and have it fade up. So the area where there is a dark shadow. If you're feeling brave, you can try doing some lines with your paintbrush. Don't feel like you have to, because you can always use the marker. You just kind of brush up like that to create your plant life. Water first. This is an area where it's like a grayish brown, so I'm just bleeding it up. Very light amount of black. Less water. And you get more like a line that you would get from the marker. Gray area right here. After you're all done inking, you can go over the ink with the fine Sharpie, which is thicker, and it will create more dramatic lines for you. But as before, you don't want to use a marker while it's wet, because for some reason it just makes the marker clog up and not work anymore. Okay, we need to create some darker areas behind. Very diluted, just creating kind of a grayish color back here. It's actually more of a grayish blue, so I'm going to bring some more blue into this. Wetting the brush, wetting the fabric, and the blue, pulling that up, pulling it up, add a little black to that. And now it creates kind of a bluish black. And need to do a little of that over here as well. Adding more blue. I think I'm going to splatter a little more. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish darkening the other side now, and it'll be easier for me to flip it over as I did before, because otherwise my hand would be getting in or laying over wet ink. If you like what you've done, blow dry it to set it. And here we go. I'm going to be inking upside down, where that may be very difficult for you to do with the shadows. It might be too hard for me as well. I may have to just revert. Okay, time for this side. And I'm referring to my pattern on a regular basis. And even despite doing that, it's going to be different than the original pattern. So what you're seeing me do there would be a good thing to practice on your original practice fabric. And what I'm doing is a branch by going up and kind of jetting off and then flicking out. Going up and flicking out. And that kind of creates a little stem, because stems get smaller as they go out. So if you practice that, it's very, very light touch. Or remember, you can always just use markers. Almost time for the water. Remember to keep your hand down or your elbow down. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead now and build up or make more pronounced the trees where I had inked before, and I'm going to flip it over. Just try to stay over the actual lines that I drew before. Very, very light touch on that brush gives you a really fine point, but maybe you might want to use the other brush. So we'll go down to the smallest of the line brushes. And that one will give you a thinner line so that you can handle these finer lines that you created before. Brush was a little wet. But remember, we're going to be going over this with thread as well. So some of these implications will be showing up not from the inking, but from the actual stitching that we're doing. So this is just like pretending there are little trees back there. Some will be stronger lines or more detailed looking lines, and some will be more muddled like that. And now we're ready for the water. Time to break into the turquoise. I'm going to go ahead and use my line brush, and now I'm going to use my fan brush and wet the water area. Including the waterfall. Goes sideways. You can see how it just kind of bleeds out, but it's not going to cover the white because we did the white first in a solid. Take it down here. Don't need a lot, that's for sure. This is a very strong color. And we're gonna splatter it out at the bottom here. We want it to look like the water is falling down over the edge. So kind of a downward splatter here. You see, I'm not trying to make it look like any particular pattern here. Blotchy, splatter. So the waterfalls come down, and if you're using the fan brush, you're bringing down part, not all of it, because it spreads out like that. So we don't want it to look like, we don't want to cover all of that white. And then below the waterfall, it gets straight again. So it comes down and then goes straight. And here it's too shallow for the water to fall. And we're so far back here. I want to create that look, that illusion of distance and being away from the waterfall. And I'm going to add a little bit of black into this color using this cap again. So you can see the difference in the shading of it. By adding a little black to it, we get kind of a green-gray look. And that's going to be like under the falls. So up in here. Not totally full coverage. And once you get some, then I got my brush wet now, I'm going to pull up. And not take it all the way to the top of the waterfall, because we want that waterfall's top edge to be bright. Now this is a shadow color to be used on the edges of the water. There would be shadow, especially on this side of the rocks that stick out. There's another shadow area. Okay, we are almost done and ready to mix in some thread. I hope that you're having fun with this, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of this teal to the trees. as it's always a good idea when you bring in a color that you bring it in to more than one area. The eye, as it's searching around, likes to find the same color in different places. Go ahead and take this and mix some of that shadow in over here. Make more. Okay, I got some more here. Take it in. Okay, more splatters, more dramatic, bigger collections around the edge here. And we want it to, as I mentioned, we want to make it look like it's starting to drip off the page or off the fabric. Do some more up here. Time to add a little bit more of the nude with the brown and get some break from the top of the waterfall so that you can see that the waterfall is there. Got a little black, a lot of brown. Oh no. What do I do? What do I do? Paper towel. And wet that. And I'm going to go ahead and pick another fresh paper towel now and some more dabbing. Okay, mix in the lighter, the nude color with the brown and a little bit of black. Gives us kind of a peachy appearance. It's not too bright peach. Wet, use a liner brush, and I'm going to go across the trees now to give them their color that's other than white, because we did white before. Now we're just giving them like a peachy color. So I hope you can see this is a very, very loose style. I want you to see that waterfall edge, but not so straight that it doesn't look real. Okay, let's see. I'll bring in some of that turquoise again. more diluted and give it a little bit more excitement. You want some of the color coming in from the top. You just don't want the top of the waterfall to completely disappear. So I've drawn some lines and now I'm gonna muddle it up by putting water over it. I'm tempted to just keep painting, but the thread is what really sets this off and makes it stand out and become a full composition. And now we're ready to go ahead and take this off and heat set it with a iron and wash it if you want to wash it, so that you know that it's not going to end up changing after you've already done all the stitching. However, if it's going to be a piece of wall art on your wall, there really is no need for you to go ahead and wash it after this. Go ahead and pull it off. What do you think? How'd you do? I can't wait to see yours. I sure hope that you enjoyed learning how to ink your fabric, that you're feeling brave and ready to do it, that you are as pleased with yours as I am with mine when you're finished. And if not, remember, I gave you a lot of fabric, so go ahead and do it again and again until you like what you see. It wasn't one art project that made me good at doing art. It was multiple projects, lots of practice. So please take advantage of the fabric that I gave you and really have fun with it. Not only do this, but take pictures out of magazine, maybe your own photography, and print out something laminated. And I would love for you to share with me in the classroom after this is over. I sure hope you enjoyed the inking process and that you're brave enough to really give it a go. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And that is the only reason I got as good at artwork as I have, because I kept trying. I tried drawing a shoe and it didn't turn out like a shoe. I tried again until I got it to look like a shoe. I really, really wanted to do artwork. That's why I got good at it. And that is what it takes for you to get good at it as well. To not just try this and then if you don't like what you see, to just stop, but to try it again. And then if you're not really sure about how you like that one, well, do it again. Who's watching? It's just you and your fabric, and I'm here for you. Don't hesitate to ask questions. See you in the next class, where we cover the free motion quilting and finalizing the project.